Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Ruben Uncut. Today, we're going to talk about something that really pisses me off. Ableism. Ableism really pisses me off. Now, there's a lot to cover because ableism is pervasive throughout our culture and society. In fact, most people are ableist on some tiny level and are not aware of it. In fact, actually, that is the biggest problem with ableism. That ableism springs from a lack of knowledge, which is why I'm standing here in this fake library to drop some knowledge on you as hard as possible. We're going to be covering actually a couple different elements of ableism. But first, we're going to start with the thing that really set me off. I was scrolling innocently through Facebook when I came upon this meme posted by some Facebook page I do not follow, but showed up in my feed because someone who I hope will do better in the future had apparently given this meme a heart. And I'm not happy about that at all. So what is the meme? Well, if you're looking at this in the video format, you've already seen it. But this was posted by Truck Driving Moments, a page that for the most part posts primarily inoffensive pictures of trucks. But on this one, they decide to get big, dumb, and political and pull out their ableism for all to see, like a man masturbating on the bus. So let's take a look at this meme. Picture of a man with one leg as he is working on his truck. And the text reads, "This driver has the will to survive." And then it says, "Don't tell me you are too disabled to work." Oh, yeah. I'm going to be frank. I don't think there's anything more disgusting than quote unquote able-bodied people using examples of people with disabilities who have adapted to their new lifestyle as a way to shame other people with disabilities. There's so much wrong with the concept, it's hard to know where to start. For starters, all disabilities manifest differently, and some disabilities aren't even visible. Lots of people are very unemployable, not even just because they don't want to work, but because they literally do not have the emotional regulation to be considered safe to work around. I used to go and do work for food stamps here in Ohio, where we think that working for food stamps is somehow good and not a total waste of taxpayer money and free slave labor for corporations, which is what it actually is. But when I worked there was a whole table of people that were to themselves. Why? This table was marked the unemployables. Why? Because they were people who literally could not hold down a job. Now, that was due to various emotional and mental disabilities. Their table was also not allowed to have scissors. But where am I going? But let's get back to the meme. Lots of people with disabilities are all facing unique and different struggles. This man is missing a leg, which is terrible. Now, it is worth noting, though, that in terms of disabilities that prevent you from working, actually missing one of your lower limbs is not one of them. I used to work with a disabled leg. Turns out I had a tumor in my tibia that was preventing me from being able to walk. I went from walking with one cane to walking with two canes. Now, if you're looking at the meme, you can see that this man also has two canes for getting around. Now, what that literally means is that he can't carry anything while walking, which sucks. Let me tell you, that fucking sucks. Another thing that's worth noting about this meme, and to be fair, I don't know. It's possible they asked this gentleman if they could take his picture to use in this slanted political manner. However, and this is important, it is a known problem in the disability community that people that quote once again quote unquote able-bodied people, and when I say able-bodied people, I don't necessarily mean people who are fully functional. I mean people who are functional to the level where they do not understand the trials and tribulations of having a disability, especially a physical disability, tend to take pictures of people with disabilities without those people's permission and then post them online as some form of disability virtue porn or inspiration porn, if you will. Look at these people. Look at them as they manage to survive. Do you think those people want to be held up that way? No, they just want to have normal days. I'm going to let you in on that secret. The average person with a disability does not wish to be viewed as inspirational, even if on a certain level they are. But you have to understand, it gets pretty fucking tiring if people tell you you're an inspiration for doing things that everybody else does without any problem at all. No one gives a shit about that in the disability community. In fact, they'd rather you weren't doing that. So please don't take pictures of people with disabilities without their permission to be quote unquote inspiring. Now, this also happens to do with compassion towards disabilities, as there was famously a video of a McDonald's worker choosing to stop working to help feed a quadriplegic in their, actually, were they quadriplegic? They had no use of their limbs. I can't remember why. But the point is they stopped working behind the counter to choose to help feed that person. And then a third party, not involved with either the McDonald's worker or the person in the wheelchair, videotaped it and put it on the internet to inspire compassion. However, this is a violation of that person with disabilities' privacy rights. Something that many people don't seem to give any amount of flying fucks about, which is frankly disgusting. Because when you do that, it means you are ignoring the rights of a person with a disability because you can. Now, I'm going to take a moment to talk to you once about a little bit more about this meme. You see, this meme is purporting a concept, of course, which is to shame people on disability and to suggest that some people should try harder than to go on to disability, and that maybe even that some people are faking things for disability. I'm going to let you in on a secret. Now, are there people in the world who cheat disability? Sure. I actually used to live in the projects with a person who was trying to cheat disability. They didn't do it successfully. They were actually rejected because they were an idiot and a pathological liar. But the point is they were rejected, which is good. However, it has to be stated, most people who hold this concern don't know what it means to be on disability. And let me tell you, if you're the kind of person out there sitting there going, you know what, I bet life would be easier if I could cheat disability and just stay home all day. Let me tell you a secret. In the long term, you're fucking yourself. Because here's the thing. Once you're on disability, you don't have the same rights as everyone else. Fun fact. There are suddenly limitations on the amount of money you can have in your bank account. You are suddenly no longer allowed to work a certain number of hours, or you will be penalized. You will also receive extra scrutiny and have a lifetime of obnoxious paperwork to deal with. Cheating your way onto disability is something only a complete moron would do. Although, to be fair, in the ableist sentiment of the term moron, that would imply you actually did have some type of cognitive disability. Let me say this. Let me put it this way. A fool only a complete fool would attempt to cheat disability. Because here's the other thing: if you cheat Social Security disability, you're also saying, hey, I want to be poor forever. Because guess what? If you get Social Security disability, you don't get full Social Security. If you take early Social Security, you don't get full Social Security. Anyone who suddenly were to wake up one day and be like, yeah, fuck jobs, I'm going to get on Social Security disability, is a person who is absolutely not thinking ahead and does not understand the system and how it will impact their life for as long as they are on disability. Now, no, some people are not on disability forever. And to receive Social Security disability, you must have a disability for at least 2 years. Fun facts. Also, if you are on disability, you will be punished for getting married. Why? Because getting married is part of the accumulation of wealth. And we do not allow people who are on Social Security disability to be that. You cannot be wealthy on Social Security disability. Like I mentioned before, there will be caps on how much money you can have, and that includes in your bank account. If you get married, your Social Security disability benefits will be cut in half. If you are marrying another person on Social Security disability, both of your disability benefits will be cut in half and then merged into less than you would be making separately. This is a horrific piece of ableist legislation designed to discourage disabled people from getting married or especially marrying each other. Now, I don't know if this is because taxpayers hate the idea that anyone could get rich while receiving money from the government, which, of course, corporations do all the time, or if it's because we want to discourage people with disabilities from getting married because we are afraid that their genetics will be passed on to another generation, creating more people with disabilities, which is in itself a eugenics-based concept. See, a lot of people freak out about eugenics, but we don't actually pay attention to it. The concepts and ideals of eugenics are enforced throughout our society without us even thinking about it. We used to sterilize people with disabilities into the 70s. Yeah. But let's continue. This meme is aggressively ableist on so many levels that it makes me want to put my fist through the screen into truck driving moments, pull whoever made this meme out of the screen, and just bitch slap them as hard as I possibly can. I'm not, by the way, I'm not showing you the clip of the McDonald's worker feeding the person in the wheelchair because I'm not going to make the same fucked up decision that the people who filmed it did. People with disabilities are not here to inspire you. Their lives are not here for you. You need to get over yourselves and understand that the average person with a disability would rather just be treated like a normal goddamn human being. Except that they have to accept the fact that they probably need help most of the time. But from an average person who is not their caretaker or is not there to assist them, they'd like you to either leave them alone, be friendly like you would to a normal person. Bad word, normal person. See, that's the problem. There's no good word for the people who don't have disabilities, because any word we come up with for the people who don't have disabilities is, pretty degrading to everyone involved. It's a catch-22, if you will. I myself am on the autism spectrum. Now, that's an interesting form of disability because it means that I have an emotional disability, a failure to regulate my emotions compared to the ability of the average person around me. Although I've met the average person around me, and I think that they're emotionally dead inside. That might be the key. This is the type of pernicious disgustingness that I just can't stand to see. The average person does not think about what the average person with a disability is going through, as shown earlier this year by Candace Owens. I made a video about it, by the way, a video about Candace Owens, a video about why she's an ableist bitch, where she was freaking out about there being an ad for people in wheelchairs, declaring it to be woke to do that. Never mind the fact that it was literally an ad for underwear designed to be easier for people in wheelchairs to get into. But also, this type of attitude at not providing representation for people with disabilities is a problem. In fact, people with disabilities are a strong argument for the importance of representation in our society. You see, because we do not provide representation to people with disabilities, most people in society have no idea what kind of problems people with disabilities suffer from. Like, let's take the wheelchairs that so incensed Candace Owens. Fun fact about people in wheelchairs: they lack a privilege that people who walk upright pretty much take for granted. And I know, I don't even just mean walking. And I don't mean being able to carry things while you're moving. I mean being able to take a shit wherever you want. The average person not in a wheelchair can go into any bathroom pretty much. And the average person in a wheelchair cannot. I've been in numbers of buildings that have no bathroom access for people with wheelchairs. None whatsoever. So if a person with a wheelchair is in that business or home or building, whatever it may be, they will not be able to take a shit there. They will not be able to even piss there. Not only that, but the average person truly does not even understand the uses of wheelchairs. For, and this is important, if you see a person in a wheelchair and you see them get up and take a few steps out of the wheelchair to get something, that does not mean that person does not need a wheelchair. For you see, some people only need the wheelchair sometimes, and some people need the wheelchair all the times. Because wheelchairs are not just given out for the same specific disabilities. There are people whose legs can only support them for limited frames of time. This is a common thing amongst people with neuromuscular diseases, where they will need a wheelchair more and more as they age. Things like MS, The fact of the matter is the average person is not thinking about people with disabilities. They are not thinking of the struggles and hardships of people with disabilities. At every turn, we are ready to applaud compassion, but it's not really valuable to applaud compassion as much as it is to show compassion. How do we show compassion? Well, by making spaces more, accessible to people with disabilities, whether those are sensory disabilities or whether those are ramps for people with wheelchairs to get in or support bars for people in wheelchairs to use the restroom. If your businesses and buildings, frankly, don't have this, then it's because you, frankly, haven't thought about people with disabilities. You've never stopped to consider what they are going through. And this apathy is the most damning thing in our society, as it were. I was listening to NPR the other day, though. And on NPR, they had an expert talking about something called techno-ableism. So what is techno-ableism? Well, let me show you some clips. This is a man in a...
Robert Wu is back on his feet again with the help of a robotic exoskeleton called the Rewalk. The 46-year-old was paralyzed.
I'll let them explain it.
Paralyzed from the waist down when 7 tons of steel fell onto his construction trailer. Doctors told him he'd never walk again.
I didn't think I could be useful, and I wanted to die. And the worst thing is I couldn't even pull the plug.
Then he enrolled in a study of the rewalk. The battery
I want you to remember that they used the word study there. That's very important.
powered device contains motors that help power the hips and knees. A computer coordinates those movements into a walking pattern when a patient shifts their body weight.
Essentially, they're a wearable robot. I'm not generally an emotional guy, but I felt quite a rush seeing the first time that I saw somebody get up in a device.
The rewalk
Gross.
is the first exoskeleton that lets patients walk upstairs. Right now, the rewalk is only approved for use at hospitals. The FDA is currently reviewing an application for home use, which may be decided by spring. Errol Samuels suffered a spinal cord injury after a roof collapsed on him. He says using a rewalk at home would be life-changing.
I'm reaching for higher things, getting up steps, pretty much just being mobile around the house instead of rolling around, walking around.
Doctors say being able to stand and walk upright also aids circulation, digestion, and muscle tone, common problems in people with paralysis.
All the terrible things that go wrong from a sedentary lifestyle are magnified in a person with spinal cord injury. So any activity that we can provide for them stands to reason to have benefit.
Robert Wu says the rewalk has given him back something he thought he'd lost forever.
Be able to stand up next to my wife and give her a hug for the first time. Be able to walk with my children to the park. These are things that we take for granted and I've missed.
Ryan Jaslow, CBS News.
Now I know what you're thinking. Ruben, why did you say gross in the middle there? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. But I need to be clear about something. And I do need to be clear about something. Adaptive technology is extremely important. And I do not think it is bad that people are developing this at all. It is people who don't need this device's attitudes that are the problem. Let's see another clip. This 20-year-old man is paralyzed from the shoulders down. He is now able to walk for the first time using an exoskeleton, operated directly by the patient. Brain signals.
Since the 1950s, people have been promising to make paralyzed people walk. It's really one of the goals of medical science. And what's interesting about this study is that implants at either side of the skull were able to detect and translate into, as it were, computer movement, impulses in the brain, so that the individual wished to move and signals were sent enabling them to move.
Robots have come a long way, but it may take much longer before this technology becomes a solution for severely disabled people. It should be people with severe disabilities, by the way. So you may be saying, so let's look at the key point. Let's talk about the key points that I asked you to remember about both of those clips. The key one is that the first two people we saw were part of a research study. A research study, which means that they only gained access to the robot legs by agreeing to be part of the guinea pig study for it. Those types of legs are currently not available on the market at large. It is also worth noting that I showed you two different clips of two different types of robotic functioning exosuits. Now, the first one is simply for legs. It only works on the legs. It is actually significantly less advanced technology as it is based on a shifting of the weight of your upper body. While the second one, for quadriplegics, asks to take signals directly from the brain. Now, it's all good and well that we are working on these things, but I need to point out something about this. Let me give you an example. for the science fiction movie Alita Battle Angel, which, by the way, I really enjoy, a film about cyborgs in a dystopian future. In part of their promotion, the movie studio gave a robot arm to a young girl who had lost one of her arms. Now, this is an incredibly nice gesture. Very nice. However, it needs to be noted. Part of what makes it a nice gesture, and part of the reason that we don't just give these arms out to everyone who has lost a limb, is because, and this is important, that type of robot arm costs over $100,000. In fact, in the recording of this, I don't know if you saw it pop up on screen. I didn't watch the video, but it was a video about a man who had built himself a $120 million robotic arm. And there is the first big problem. The reality is that this technology will take probably decades to filter into the general accessibility of the average person with a disability. Some of them will be fortunate enough to have insurance that will work for it, but most of them will be left waiting for decades for the cost of the development of these products to come down. Also, like it said, they are currently only approved for hospital use, meaning that even those people in the study can't take them home. Now, they'll eventually be approved, and I would certainly hope that receiving a pair of those legs for being in the study would be, part of what you get for being in the study. So hopefully that worked out for them. But the reality is that the average person, as I've mentioned before, who is on disability, is poor. And in fact, is pretty much legally required to stay poor. Do you see how that would prevent the average person with a disability from getting their hands on one of these robotic devices? The other robotic device, the full quadriplegic one, which is a wonderful idea, of course, uses actual brain signal implants, which means it's going to cost probably twice as much as the leg suit we just saw. And that video even pointed out that it will be a long time before that technology is actually available to people with disabilities. This, of course, is why when people get excited or inspired by this, I have to be somewhat cynical. Because you see, you as an able-bodied person, this may be very exciting news, because for you, it is happening in the abstract. But for the average person with a disability, this is still a far-off dream. And that's not even taking into account the other side of adaptive equipment. Currently, there is plenty of adaptive equipment in the world for numerous disabilities. However, it must be noted that adaptive technology is not a perfect solution. Not a perfect solution at all. For starters, adaptive equipment frequently breaks, frequently has to be repaired. Even something as widespread in usage and as a wheelchair frequently has to receive maintenance from a hired professional who hopefully your insurance will cover. The quality and range of wheelchairs is pretty vast. There are electric wheelchairs, and there are the kinds you wheel yourself. Some of them are very heavy, some of them are very light. And depending on which kind of these wheelchairs you have is going to affect other aspects of how you get around. If you are in an electric wheelchair, for instance, your wheelchair probably weighs like over 200 pounds, probably more than that. And you're going to need special service vehicles to take it anywhere you might possibly want to go. Now, the regular wheelchair has the advantage of being able to fold up and be put into a trunk while you slide yourself into the back seat of a regular car, which is nice. However, it also means that it requires that you be the type of person who still has access to your arms. There are no perfect solutions for disabilities. And this is the heartbreaking truth of the matter. Don't get me wrong, adaptive technology is exceptionally important and will help millions of people who suffer from these types of disabilities. But you have to understand, these are not perfect solutions. Those people, even when we get the robot exosuits, those people will have to deal with things like them becoming stuck, them breaking down. What do you do if they fall over? There is going to be plenty of issues that are still presented around these robotic suits. They are going to need plenty of maintenance to repair them. They are going to have some type of internal motorized systems, especially the one that's run on neural impulses. None of these are perfect solutions. And I need to be clear here. That does not mean we should not pursue them. But what I'm saying is the existence of these devices is not an excuse for people who don't have disabilities to feel good about themselves or the world. These are progress. These are things in motion. But these are tiny steps that will not help the people in the now. And I'm not saying we shouldn't plan for helping the people in the future. I cannot stress this enough. But the reality is that today there are currently millions of people with a variety of different disabilities. And those people are forced to exist in a world that does not care about them, that is not adapted to them. Even the subtlest things in our society have helped these people in the past. For example, you know those little ramps that go up on the curbs of sidewalks? Did you know streets didn't used to have those? Did you know that back in the day, people with disabilities, like being in wheelchairs, would have to like wheel themselves around just around the sidewalk until they were fortunate enough to find their way to one of those areas where a truck or car might be pulling up? Curb stops? Is that what they're? Can't remember what they're called right now. But the point is that the earliest that there was a small city that adapted these before anyone else. And then no one did it. No one, like literally for years after that, no one did it. Until a couple of dudes playing poker in wheelchairs in San Francisco were suddenly like, you know what? Fuck this. And so they committed an act of vandalism by going around and using concrete to make their own. They, of course, got in trouble with the law, but eventually people woke up, and eventually this adaptation was made everywhere. And it benefited more than just people with disabilities, people in baby strollers, people pushing carts, people on bikes. But still, society lags behind on various adaptations that could make businesses and other services and products accessible for people with disabilities. The ADA, the piece of legislation that protects the rights of people with disabilities in this country, was not established until the 1990s, where it was signed by George H.W. Bush, a man who I generally disagree with, but have to say he did at least one good thing in signing that legislation, a piece of legislation that had been being stymied by the government for years. Prior, Jimmy Carter had promised to sign it, only to be talked out of it by big business. And of course, Nixon wasn't down to sign it either, until eventually a protest held in San Francisco, actually held in several states, but the one in San Francisco is the one that stuck and was successful, eventually got some level of passage for it. But even then, it was not official until the 90s. A tragically long fight, indeed. And even then, the ADA is not perfect, with numerous types of adaptations and various adaptations stripped from it. For example, you may not be aware of this, but the ADA, at one point, the way it was written, would have made it so that stop signs would talk to people who were blind. However, this was ultimately stripped from the bill. Now, there are certain places in the country where you can find crosswalks with this feature, but it was never signed into law. If you are a business owner, I encourage you to think about the needs of people with disabilities. The reality is that we, as people, can now, currently, there are things we can do to make the world more accessible to these people. And it is truly tragic that we don't. But for a lot of people, it is easier to see robot suits on YouTube and feel like, hey, it's not that bad. Because it's easy for people to look at disability inspiration porn, whether that's movies, whether that's questionable memes and videos on the internet, and feel good about, hey, compassion, when in fact, the real compassion would be to make the world more accessible. It's nice to sit around and go, well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Which is a quote from a man who died of syphilis. Just throwing that out there. Also, we now know that Nietzsche was wrong. That which does not kill you right away kills you slowly, painfully, over an extended period of time. So I beg of you, I plead of you, please try to think about these things. Try to hold the struggles that a person with disabilities has in your mind. I've spent a lot of time working with people with disabilities. I've seen them. I know them. I know that they have unique struggles that the quote unquote average person does not deal with. They have different rights than you. They have, in fact, in many ways, just by asking for help, they are giving up some of their rights. Does anyone remember that period where the Trump administration decided that they were going to use social media to kick people off of disability? Because I do. I do. So I beg of you, I plead of you, do not look at people with disabilities as people who need your pity. They do not need your pity, they need your compassion. They need your understanding. Stop worrying about a handful of stupid people who want to, quote unquote, cheat the system and get your precious tax money. For believe it or not, whenever you try and strike out at those people, it is people who genuinely need the help that you will ultimately hurt. Frankly, I don't care if a handful of foolish people decide to try and cheat the system. After all, people who will cheat the system will cheat anyone. If anything, by cheating the system, we're keeping them out of your hair. So please, 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 if you see someone post that fucking meme, say something. Get educated. Get compassionate. Get understanding. Sometimes in life, the quote unquote will to survive is not enough. Did you know that cave people took better care of people with disabilities than we do? We have archaeological evidence of early man taking care of people in their tribes with disabilities, including things such as spina bifida. But here, in this modern techno world, most people just try to forget. which is a little stupid, because the reality is, the cold, hard reality is that everyone you know is one bad day away from having a disability. Thank you for listening or watching Ruben Uncut. I hope you enjoyed the melodic tones of my voice, which got somehow calmer as I got angrier. I know I spent a lot of these yelling, and I didn't really yell as much this time. I guess now you know the difference between genuine frustration and when I'm yelling to make a point. Please follow on Spotify, and please like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Also, if you're on YouTube, maybe hit that notification bell. If you're interested in communicating with my podcast, you can email me at rubenuncut@gmail.com. I bid you a great day. Oh, and just for good measure, fuck Candace Owens.